You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Well, hey there, y'all. Welcome to episode 113 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. I'm Juliette Miranda, and I have two stories to share with you today. One about cemetery surprises, and the other is a Crazytown Halloween adventure. But before we get to those stories, let's have a little bit of whiskey. Fill up your glasses, y'all, and join me in a toast. Cheers. Oh, that is just so warm and good. Ooh. Today I am drinking Michter's single barrel straight rye whiskey. Now that it's colder outside, I find that I'm really enjoying the spicy punch of a good rye. Now, Michter's is a straight whiskey. That means it's been aged for at least 2 years, and this one clocks in at a very drinkable 84 proof. Right up front, like a good rye should be, this one is spicy. But what I'm really digging about it is that it has this great oaky flavor as well. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this one's been aged for a little bit longer than 2 years, maybe 3. Hard to say, but it definitely tastes a little bit like that barrel, and I'm loving it. There's also a little bit of citrus running through this, and maybe just a touch cherry. Mostly, though, you just get this really nice, wonderful, creamy spiciness. Now, this Michter's rye is very, very easy to sip straight, but I can also see it being lovely in a cocktail. This whiskey has a decidedly Halloween sort of feel to it, I guess. And I have to say, Halloween is one of the very few things that the Midwest gets right. For starters, Illinois is one of the top 5 pumpkin-producing states in the country. Who knew? And you have to admit, the leaves are very pretty when they start to turn color. So it's definitely not the worst place to be for Halloween. That distinction goes to Los Angeles, where truly the only way you know the season has changed is by what's on television. But still, to me, there is no better place to be for Halloween than New Orleans. Oh, I know, big shocker that I call out my beloved New Orleans. But what I love about New Orleans is also what I love about Halloween. That there's just a little bit of magic added to the ordinary. And you never know where you'll experience it. Sometimes you just happen to stumble upon a great second line celebration, or maybe you meet a local legend in a bar. But sometimes that magic comes from a cemetery. St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 stands on the outskirts of the French Quarter. There is no discernible order to this collection of the dead. There are only haphazard tombs that crumble together, spilled bricks and epitaphs, grass thrusting through walkways that lead to nowhere. Y'all, in one square block, this is an eternal home to thousands. My guy and I have visited it many times, always on our own and never with any intentions. I mean, sure, there are countless ghost tours that you can take that head through there, but as for my guy and I, we just make our best discoveries when we're not looking for them. And I will tell y'all, there is a lot to be found in this cemetery. Bodies aren't really buried so much as they are entombed in these above-ground chambers. Wall vaults tower overhead as outdoor catacombs for many, and they're stacked one on top of another. Now, the oldest of these graves are made from stone and brick, some 200 years ago, and they absolutely give the impression that they could turn to dust at any moment. And there are newer graves, too, designed for society, which are cast from marble. But me, I have a fondness for the step tombs, these semi-subterranean slabs that have been covered, somewhat loosely in some instances, with brick. They may or may not be among the oldest graves there, but they do seem to be the easiest to escape from. Not that anyone would or could, right? Sometimes, I'm not so sure. The French Quarter is heavy with legends and smoke trails that curl through whispered history. Where one dark corner may only bristle with a little bit of energy, there is always a doorway or a hallway that will wail. Such hauntings, if you will, take up more room in the quarter than any of its ordinary residents. And of course, Cemetery Number 1 is considered haunted. At the very least, there are interesting people buried there. Not that you necessarily know immediately or at all, not when so many of the vaults have absolutely no identification or clear markings. It seems as though visitors just sort of work on instinct when they're there paying respects. Voodoo priestess Marie Laveau is reportedly on the grounds, both in spirit and in tomb. Her sarcophagus-style vault is rarely alone, and always covered in elaborate markings and offerings. It seems to be mostly tourists, but occasionally a voodoo practitioner will be there, knocking on the front of her tomb and performing quietly elaborate rituals in hopes of cajoling her favor. The routine has always appeared just a little bit forced to me. But again, in the quarter, and especially on Halloween, energy is always ripe, as my guy and I were about to discover. You see, there are others buried in Number 1, other voodoo priests and priestesses without the notoriety of Laveau. Their graves are mostly unmarked by history, but they're found nonetheless. My guy and I had been wandering around the walkways of the cemetery a few years back, right around Halloween. One tomb in particular stood out among the others, taller than some, with a marred Mardi Gras mask perched on a spire. Candles, cards, unsmoked cigarettes, and baubles lay in tribute at the foot of the vault. It was like any other voodoo altar, yet somehow, to me, it felt a little different. And even my guy, who would never in a million years claim to feel any sort of energy or see ghosts, or even acknowledge the paranormal, well, he stops in front of this tomb too. I don't think I can ever really explain how or why, but the atmosphere around it just felt steady, I guess. It was less desperate and more fulfilled. Or maybe I just had a lot to drink that afternoon. Now, the custom at these voodoo tombs is to ask for assistance or guidance, but I'm not one who prays, and I wasn't really inclined to ask for anything from whoever might have been listening, but I felt compelled nonetheless to leave a tribute. So I poured a healthy shot of bourbon from my flask on the ground in front of the tomb. It was a random bit of whimsy, one that made me smile and my guy roll his eyes. But I'll tell you, it felt good. So that night, he and I visited the casino. It wasn't something we'd planned on doing, but a late-night dinner left us near its doorsteps. Now, you gotta understand, my guy and I have an understanding in New Orleans that we will always follow wherever that Louisiana wind carries us. So that night, we just kind of let it gently nudge us in the direction of the 3-card poker table. I am a ridiculously conservative bettor when playing 3-card. I take a very slow and steady approach, which pretty much means that I can maintain for more than an hour without losing much of what I started with. But that night, on my 3rd hand, well, I bet big. It wasn't an all-in moment or anything quite as dramatic as that, but as the dealer shuffled his deck, something just prompted me to raise my bet. And it was enough to make my guy raise his eyebrows and kind of question me like, "Hey, slugger, had a couple of drinks in ya?" But I just shrugged my shoulders. Dropping that handful of chips on the table had felt completely instinctual. It wasn't something I thought about. I just did it. When the cards had been dealt, I casually reached for mine. I wasn't expecting much. I mean, the general karma of gambling always seems to dictate that the second you raise your bet, you lose. And my first card was a letdown. The 5 of Hearts. Definitely not the sexiest card in the deck. The 7 of Hearts came next, which gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe I'd catch a flush. Y'all, that 3rd card? The 6 of Hearts. I nudged my guy and showed him my cards. I needed confirmation that I wasn't imagining things, because while my math may be shitty, I knew enough to be fairly certain that I was holding a straight flush. The table explodes with cheers when they see my cards. It's not something that happens all that often. I mean, the odds on a straight flush are 400 to 1. But that night, somehow, they tipped in my favor. Had it happened in any other city, I would have attributed our fortune to luck. In New Orleans, a place where I leave more than just a shot of bourbon behind, I can't help but think that maybe someone or something found a way to say thanks. And as always, life, or otherwise, continues. And with that, I am once again raising up my glass and drinking to New Orleans. Cheers, y'all. Oh, God damn it, that's good. You know, for as much as I love Halloween, it does make me just the slightest bit sad how holidays change as we grow up, particularly where Halloween is concerned. I think there's a certain mood to seasons like Halloween that are just hard to recapture when you're an adult. Sure, we watch It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown and dress up for parties and visit haunted houses, and it's always fun. And mind you, I'm not saying I haven't had some wonderful Halloween celebrations as an adult. But there's a certain sense of, I guess it's fear, that's missing. I mean, that was the best part about going out trick-or-treating as a kid, particularly in the 80s. Everything looked and felt different. There was always just the hint of a possibility that maybe something was lurking in the dark. Could have been the old man who lived in the creepy house down the road. Maybe it was a ghost. You just accepted that on Halloween, anything was possible. And that was delightfully terrifying. It's only fitting, then, that my last great Halloween experience was shared with perhaps the scariest girl I've ever known, Crazytown. She, too, was delightfully terrifying, though more in a year-round, potentially land-you-in-jail kind of way. But even with all of her wild notions and bad decisions, Crazytown was a little bit of a romantic. Perhaps not as morbidly romantic as I am, but she was a girl who still had her first teddy bear propped up on her dresser, and who could get just a bit teary-eyed over Jane Austen. So one October during our college years, when I complained to her that I missed trick-or-treating, Crazytown did not hesitate in suggesting that we go. I have to admit, I was kind of hoping she would. I usually filtered all of my random impulses from Crazytown because I knew full well that she could latch onto the most asinine whim like a tick. That was just how Crazytown worked. There were no bad ideas as far as this girl was concerned. That time, though, my Halloween nostalgia overrode my reserve. The future was looming, and I was young enough to believe that graduating from college meant I'd have to start acting like an adult. I wasn't quite ready for that, and if there was anyone who would be up for indulging in childish behavior, I knew it would be Crazytown. Trick-or-treating seemed simple and innocent enough. I mean, for starters, we would be close to home, and there were no musicians involved. Two things which I presumed greatly reduced our trouble quotient. It would just be the two of us, dressed as a French maid and a Western saloon girl, going door to door after dark. What could possibly go wrong? Had you asked me that at the start of the night, I would have been certain that nothing could stop us. It was the single most glorious Halloween Eve I have ever experienced. The air was crisp with just the slightest hint of smoke. Vivid red and yellow leaves still clung to the trees, and they would occasionally rustle as the wind kicked in. It was everything Halloween should be. We were wandering through the neighborhood near Crazytown's parents' house. It was an old neighborhood lined with an uncommon collection of Victorian mansions, dated brownstones, and sprawling Frank Lloyd Wright estates. We strolled up and down the dark sidewalks, arm in arm, laughing at the costumes we saw and giggling over the stunned expression of parents answering the door to us two college girls who could easily give new meaning to the phrase trick or treat. It was moments like this when I really adored my girlfriend. I loved that she would shamelessly dig her hand into a candy bowl and grab fistfuls of her favorite chocolates where I'd only take one or two. So Crazytown was the perfect companion for about 5 blocks or so. That was how long her romantic side lasted before being completely usurped by her manic one. I could tell she was starting to get a little bit twitchy when she started flirting with the dads who would open the door to us. And I knew it was probably in both of our interests if we started walking back toward her parents' house. She had no interest in going back, however, and insisted we keep walking. It was just such a beautiful night, she said, and she was having so much fun. And y'all, again, I was a little relieved. Honestly, I was having too much fun to want it to end. So we just kept walking. We turned up a new street and found our way down another one or two, stopping every so often to trick-or-treat, until we came across the house. Every neighborhood has one. It's that giant, hulking house on the one corner without a streetlight. This house was especially ominous. The yard was overrun with leaves and dying bushes. Half of the windows had blackout curtains. The others had holy screens patched with duct tape and garbage bags. A gutted Mustang festered on the far end of the driveway, and a collection of rusty skateboards and broken sports equipment sat on the porch. There was no denying it. This house was haunted. But not by any ghosts. No. This house was haunted by frat boys. A couple faded Greek letters that had been spray-painted onto the tree stump in the center of the yard clued us in. And that was a sight that scared me far more than any trio of 6s ever could. Leave it to my crazy girlfriend to find the one unregulated frat house in town. Let's go ring the doorbell. I look at Crazytown. All of my warm feelings toward her vanish and are replaced by immediate annoyance. No way. No fucking way, I say. That house looked like trouble, and I wanted no part of it. Besides, before we left, I had extracted a promise from Crazytown that we would not attend any parties that night. Trick-or-treating, that's it, and I intended to hold her to it. But that damn Crazytown was anything but an idiot, and she could always counter any argument I had. She looks at me and she asks, "Do you see any parties?" And I had to admit she had me. The house was completely still. She's looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to say something. So she just sighs and says, "Well, you can stand here and wait for me if you want, but I'm going to go ring that doorbell and get me some candy." Crazytown turns and flounces her way up the sidewalk to the front door, her ridiculous ruffled skirt bouncing up and down with every step. Fuck. We'd played this game more times than I cared to remember, and there was no way to win. The last time I tried to stand my ground with her, I wound up spending 4 hours alone at a truck stop while she chased down some random guy in a Corvette. No way was I going to let that happen this time. I met up with her on the porch, just as she punched the doorbell. It didn't exactly work, but it warbled out enough noise to bring 3 truly unfortunate guys to the door. They were drunk and in the middle of some hot mess of a half-assed all-guys Halloween celebration. One dude was wearing a devil tail, one had on a stained football jersey, and the third was wearing an orange wig. Ugh. Trick or treat. Well, they ogle the 2 little treats who have conveniently landed on their doorstep and slur out a very poor attempt at a greeting. I do my best to give them the stink eye, but that damn Crazytown is flirting it up as if she really believed something good was going to come out of this. Not surprisingly, those guys were all out of candy, but well-stocked in beer and other so-called treats. Crazytown gives me her best pouty face, but I am not having it. Sorry, y'all. No candy, no deal. I grab Crazytown by the sleeve and drag her away. They call after us as we mince our way down the driveway, and Crazytown lets loose a few whines about just wanting to score some beer, but I can tell she's only mildly annoyed. Had the guys been better looking, well, there's no doubt that then at least one of us would have been propped up on a beer keg. Fortunately, Crazytown declares that her feet hurt, and we both decide it's time to head home. Except that neither one of us can remember exactly which direction home is. An hour ago, the sidewalks had been full of kids and lined with well-lit houses. But trick-or-treat hours had ended, leaving the neighborhood dark and quiet, with only Crazytown and I arguing in hushed voices about which way to head. Remember, these are pre-cell phone days, so the only thing we had to rely on was the position of the fucking moon and our rather shaky sense of direction. We walk toward a line of houses that appear vaguely familiar, and I am ridiculously conscious of how we look. When surrounded by other people in equally wild get-ups, our costumes seemed risque but cute. After dark, walking alone, I started to feel a little bit like a pheasant during hunting season. The block we're on hits a dead end, and we're forced to double back. Even Crazytown seems a little bit unnerved as we make our way down a different street. We're both silent as we walk, clutching our bags of candy, high heels clicking indecently on the sidewalk. And then there's a noise. It catches my attention because it's a shuffling sort of sound, like leaves being moved. It's quick and rustling and short-lived, so I write it off as someone's pet and keep moving. But then I hear it again, and I grab Crazytown's hand. "Did you hear that?" Well, she had. So we both pause and listen, but of course it doesn't happen again. So it has to be an animal, right? Crazytown and I reassure each other that it's probably nothing and continue walking, hoping that something, a tree, a street sign, whatever, will spark recognition in one of us about our whereabouts. Damn these old suburban towns. They're full of winding streets and malfunctioning lights. And the houses are set so far back from the road, it's impossible to get your bearings. We're both starting to panic just a little bit. And it doesn't help that those rustling sounds keep trailing behind us in erratic bursts. They always seem to stop just before I'm set to turn around. And then, as I begin to think that maybe I imagine them, I'll hear it. That same dragging, lumbering, shuffling sort of sound inching closer and closer to our stupid stiletto heels. Crazytown grips my hand and points ahead. There are 2 stone lions sitting at the foot of a very long driveway. Their shadows seem to waver a little bit in the moonlight, and we both ease just a little bit. We'd passed them earlier in the night, so thankfully that could only mean that we had to be heading in the right direction. So we had that going for us. But the odd shuffling continued, and now it's accompanied by muffled breathing. Y'all, this was not some guy out walking his dog. This was not good. Fear grips the pit of my stomach, and I start to run through my mental self-defense checklist. The first rule in self-defense is to know your surroundings. Actually, technically speaking, the first rule of self-defense is to not put yourself in bad situations. But I blew that out of the water years ago when I allowed myself to become attached to Crazytown. I was trying to build up my confidence a little bit, but looking around, I didn't see a whole lot to go on. Although we knew better where we were heading, we still had several blocks to go before we were on our own turf. There was very little light on the road, and countless dark corners, and neither one of us was exactly armed, unless you counted our stiletto heels, which for both of us would require elaborate unlacing and buckling to remove. We did have 2 rather large sacks of candy, but what the hell were we going to do with those? Pelt our potential murderers with mini Snickers bars? In short, we were fucked. I lean over to Crazytown and whisper, "We're being followed." And she whispers back, "Oh, I know." And she sounds completely casual about it, as if she has known all along and is now dropping a trail of M&Ms behind us to make it easier for our attackers to find us. I tell her I think we should run for it. And now she looks at me as if I'm the crazy one and says, I have a better idea. I'm hoping she's going to suggest knocking on someone's door and having them call us a cab. But that, y'all, is definitely not Crazytown's style. Instead, she stops walking, whips around, and calls out to her invisible stalker and says, Enough of the shit! Get out here and talk to us like a real fucking man. I'm too stunned to move. In my self-defense class, we were taught to attack first, only as a last resort. Heckling your murderer was definitely not recommended. When Crazytown starts tapping her foot and yells out, We're waiting, asshole! There's more shuffling. I hear voices, muffled laughter, and a thud. Then steps. A guy walks out from behind a row of hedges. 2 other guys appear next to him, and I realize it's the drunken frat boys. The thought didn't exactly comfort me, but I follow Crazytown as she stalks up to them. The apparent leader of this gang is still wearing his orange wig. He lights a cigarette and leers at us, revealing a row of crooked upper teeth. He looks bigger than I remembered from his doorway. I do my best to conceal my fear, but it is very hard to look like a badass when you're wearing a French maid costume. Crazytown, however, has no such problem. She looks at him and asks, Just what the fuck are you supposed to be? He takes another drag and says, I'm a clown, baby. A dirty fucking clown. His friends chuckle and inch a little bit closer to us. Well, I'm bracing myself now, and I am anticipating that something horrible is going to happen. I didn't know if they were going to jump us or what, but I was terrified. Crazytown, however, does not look impressed. She walks up to Orange Wig Guy and grabs the cigarette right out of his mouth. A trail of smoke lingers between us and them. She takes a quick puff and blows more smoke in his direction. Oh, right, a clown, she says, dripping with sarcasm. Well, buddy, clowns don't smoke. They burn. Crazytown then flicks the lit cigarette right into the guy's wild orange wig. Those synthetic fibers may as well have been kindling. And as the first lick of fire curled from the clown's head, Crazytown nudges me and she yells, Now we run. She and I took off down the street, running as fast as we can on our heels. The guys are yelling in the background. Neighbors begin turning on lights and threatening to call the cops. But Crazytown and I are long gone. We slow down when the voices have faded into the background and sit on a curb to catch our breath and take off our heels. Somehow, in our mad dash, we'd both managed to hang on to our candy bags. And Crazytown reaches into hers to pull out a Kit Kat. She breaks off half and hands it over to me, brushing a tangle of my hair off my face as she does. Her blue eyes reflect just a little bit of the moonlight when she smiles at me and says, Happy Halloween, girlie. Y'all, it's true that holidays like Halloween do change as we grow up, which is, I suppose, for the best. But that doesn't change the fact that every so often when I see that full bright moon on a crisp Halloween Eve, I can't help but wish I could go trick-or-treating again. Only this time, I'd do it in sensible shoes. And now, y'all, I am raising up my glass and wishing you a very happy Halloween. Well, y'all, my guy and I are off to spend the Halloween weekend in the wilds of Michigan at a little cabin in the woods. I have no idea what kind of craziness is going to ensue, but don't worry. I'll be back next Sunday to tell you all about it. Until then, head on over to theunwritablерant.com and sign up for my newsletter. Or connect with me on Twitter and let me know how you're going to be spending your Halloween. Hope y'all have a great week. We'll chat soon. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.